Emotions are centered in the lower part of the brain.
How was insanity seen in the past? And is modern society making us mentally ill? From the dawn of man to current challenges, including the impact of social media and new psychedelic treatments.
Electroshock therapy may be recommended for other disorders.
Meet the experts in talks about all aspects of mental illness, from historical perspectives to contemporary challenges and future innovations. Welcome to Engelsberg's interviews on mental health, and welcome Marie Daouda.
Thank you for having me.
You're an author and a literary scholar at the University of Oxford, and we're going to talk about mental health. So my first question to you is, what is mental health to you?
Well, that's a very broad question, and mental health is a very broad topic. What I find interesting with it is that it can be addressed through so many different perspectives. Today, we talk about mental health. We see it in a positive way of how to feel good in your head, just as you'd feel good in your body. I suppose the questions that we ask ourselves nowadays about neurodivergence, about autism, etc., a few centuries ago, they would have been addressed in a very different perspective, and people were much more interested in talking about madness. So today, madness is almost a taboo word. You can't talk about madness. But at the same time, talking about neurodivergence and neurotypicality is present overwhelmingly either on social media or even in the corporate world in terms of how to make the social public space more acceptant, more tolerant of people who do not behave or who do not have the same level of mental health as others. So it opens so many different possibilities for discussion, really.
So how did we end up here? I mean, you mentioned now social media. So is that to blame for everything this?
Well, many people today would say that social media is responsible for the crisis that we see among young people. Many people I'm more familiar with Britain, obviously. Many people complain about feeling more and more depressed, anxious, etc. The weird thing is that medical terms like depression and anxiety seem to have taken the place of emotional words like sadness or feeling overwhelmed and things like that. So one of the associations between social media and mental health is that people feel they are being watched all the time and they are putting up a show all the time. But symmetrically, the attitudes that we have on social media are not altogether new. So I'm very interested, for instance, in the way a philosopher like Jean-Jacques Rousseau created his own public persona, not only through his writings in his lifetime, his essays and his non-fiction writings, but also through his novel La Nouvelle Héloïse, which was one of the bestsellers of the 18th century, and his posthumous work, Les Confessions, that definitely shaped the way individuals felt that their emotions were the most essential aspect of their identity. So Rousseau put that out there in the public space, and immediately afterwards, the Romantic generation pops in, and you have characters like Byron describing Rousseau as the man who made madness beautiful and totally embracing this idea that feelings have to be expressed, have to be put out there as a sort of public show. So it is a radical change from the most ancient perspective that your feelings have to be kept under control, and especially your desires have to be directed. Because in the, I'm thinking of the antiquity, especially someone like St. Augustine would have seen desire and emotion as the thing that might divert you from what you really want. So when he writes that through wanting, I achieved what I did not want, it seems exactly the opposite of the more romantic attitude that following desire is what leads you to become who you really are. So today we really are inheriting this romantic perspective. So it's not altogether new that we would have this sense of creating the public self, but through social media, it has made it a lot easier to create a self-portrait by taking a selfie or having a self-narrative by making a TikTok video. So the progress in technology has made anyone capable of achieving these things very quickly.
And has it happened too fast, so we're not mature enough to handle this, or?
There's no really way of saying that it happened too fast or not fast enough. Things just happen, and then we have to see how they change the way that we relate to ourselves, the way we relate to one another. So I would tend to have a non-judgmental approach to the way young people are using social media. I think other people are way more qualified than I am to talk about the negative aspects of the use of, the creation of a social persona online, etc. I'm a lot more interested in how this shows that there are some permanent elements in the way we create social bonds, social contact, even when we have the impression that now everything is virtual. So if you see young people today in public transport or whatever, they're all leaning towards their phone. They're talking to thousands of people and interacting with way more people than, than their grandparents would have interacted with in their entire life. So this does create a difference. Whether we can have a moral judgment on it, saying that this is good or bad, I don't think we have enough distance for assessing that yet. So I'd say that we can be cautious, we can also be intrigued by it, but it's very hard to cast a judgment on it.
Yes, but as a literary scholar, I guess you see this as a cultural expression, right? The way we interact with social media, or is this literature that you're making?
I think today the proper word is content creator.
Of course, yes.
So you become an influencer when the content you've created has gained enough traction. We find ourselves with a whole new vocabulary that in fact talks about things that have been around not only for decades and sort of post-pop culture era, but for centuries. People who are interested in what you're doing will imitate you, duplicate what you're creating. And the way trends work online is fascinating, because we have moved from the idea of just sharing content to duplicating content. And that's the whole idea of a TikTok trend. You'd have videos that do similar things in different contexts, playing on the distance and similarity between the original one and the subsequent one. So in a way, it's as though we have all acquired the desire to become influencers. And that's so interesting. Well, with regards to the Romantic movement, Rousseau created this idea that what matters is developing your individuality. There is no connection between you and the others, because you're so special, and you create that as what you display to others. The Romantics afterwards have totally embraced that. But a fascinating French philosopher, René Girard, has tried to deconstruct that by saying that this romantic attitude is actually a lie in plain sight. Because the Romantics were imitating. They were imitating one another. They were imitating the present generations. When they create one of these tortured romantic heroes, the hero claims to be unique, but he is imitating someone else in the novel. So this whole idea of being unique because you do not imitate anyone is a lie. It's, we're social animals that keep imitating one another. It's how we learn to talk. It's how we learn to walk. But what René Girard brought in is the idea that when we imitate someone, it's actually how we acquire a desire. So the desire is not intrinsic to your being. It is something that you have just borrowed from someone who has indicated it as being, someone who has indicated something as being desirable. So the object of your desire doesn't matter as much as who you want to be. So by imitating someone's desire, what you imitate is really that person. But now with social media, all of us can be the one imitated. So the character that Girard calls the mediator. So we call that being an influencer today. And we have completely lost the idea that there are things worth pursuing. And these things, well, it can be material, it can be as ephemeral as the latest iPhone, a new car, a new house, whatever, or it can be the transcendentals. And I think what is lacking in our use of social media nowadays is that there's very little room for it to talk about things that never pass. So truth, beauty, goodness. And I have the impression that the strongest influencers are the ones who manage to channel some sort of that into a more mundane discourse. But behind it, what we all aspire to is truth, beauty, and goodness. It might be the truth of, I don't know, a big media debunker who would be online trying to chase fake news and gets lots of followers for that. It can be beauty because you're trying the latest makeup or trying the latest dress or latest pair of shoes. And goodness, well, many people try to be lifestyle influencers, showing you how to live well, how to be a good person. So strangely enough, we do find a bit of that even in the most basic social media trends. But the internet is so saturated with trends that none of it seems to settle down, none of it seems to provide a reliable model for young persons to imitate and build their own personality around. So many social media commentators have talked about the saturation of trends. There are so many trends that you could have everything and its opposite. So if you're a woman, for instance, you can be a girl boss, you can be the head of the corporate world, or you could also be a tradwife trying to build your perfect little cottage with no interference from the outer world. And no one would tell you, this is better than that one. These are just what happens in the comments and people arguing with one another. But at the core of it, we don't have a system of value that says, well, maybe one of these choices would give you better chances of happiness. We're just left to our own endless possibilities, and it's very puzzling.
It sounds like the perfect individualism, or...
Yes, in a way it is individualism pushed to its limits, yes, where everyone wants to be seen, but no one has the time to really see anyone else.
And that's a kind of isolation, isn't it?
Well, I suppose you could look at it in two different ways. It has been shown to be isolating in many sociology studies that teenagers who are too online do not have the time to create real long-lasting relationships in the real world. My generation was the generation that made friends online through chat rooms and IRC and things like that. And in a way, these connections were a substitute for the friendships that could not be made elsewhere because, well, making friends is actually difficult. So one of the advantages of the internet is that it already sorts out who your friends would be. The algorithm would tell you, I don't know, you've researched this or that film, and all of a sudden you have all these people appearing on your feed who are commenting on that film, and maybe you could be friends with them, or maybe not, because all of this is, of course, well, a lot of social display, a lot of content creation rather than genuine, authentic interaction. And that leaves us wanting, that leaves us lacking a real reason to be connected to someone.
So then you talk about friends, and friends are a good thing, but you've studied good and evil in literature. Is there, we can come to that, but is there good and evil in social media?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm thinking especially of how things happened during the lockdowns. I think that is when we saw the best and the worst of social media. It was both a wonderful way to stay in touch with people you could not go out and see, and also there were incredible high levels of bullying, of anxiety-generating behavior online. And well, when we talk about bullying, it almost always seems like there's that one evil person online bullying everyone else. No, the social media creates this sense of a lack of accountability, and everyone can be the worst version of themselves online as well. And that too is a possibility. So either you create a whole show to show how good you are, or you feel that you can act in total impunity and do whatever you want, telling people things you'd never tell them if you were in the same room face to face. And
does that relate to good and evil in literature? Is there a connection here?
Well, I suppose there is. Good and evil and friendship are interesting if you look at how they appear in fiction. As far as philosophy is concerned, Aristotle presented friendship as a good. So there's that whole tradition, well, either for Aristotle or Seneca, having a friend is almost a purpose in life, and they have an extremely high appreciation of how friendship could pull you towards the best version of yourself, because your friend is the one who can correct you. Having a friend is accepting to have both a model, someone who can criticize you without you taking too much offense. So they had a very high view on friendship, and there are beautiful literary friendships, extremely sacrificial, because your friend gives meaning to your life, because all of a sudden there is someone worth fighting with and fighting for. And if you look at The Lord of the Rings and how influential it is to young people today, it is a wonderful story of friendship and mutual support through putting your own life at risk, because all of a sudden it's this idea of fellowship that matters more than anything else. So friendship does provide us with an education into good and evil, and it's something that literature can offer either through fiction or non-fiction.
So there is a connection then
Yes, I
between
think there is, yeah.
social media and also you've been interested in naturalism and decadence, and of course online on social media there are restrictions on what you can show, and well, you can probably be decadent, but you can't be a naturalist on, on social media, or?
No, that's so interesting, because Gustave Courbet's painting L'Origine du Monde, so you know that this famous portrait that displays the private parts of a woman lying with her legs open, has been censored by Facebook. So it asks this question of what is acceptable when it is in art, that would, of course, not be acceptable if it was not art. So a lot has been said and written recently about the question of morality in art. Should a book be banned because it presents a bad character? I don't think so. Bad characters are amazing. They make literature interesting. However, once we try to sanitize literature by removing evil, not only do we remove this interesting emotional aspect to it, but we also lose in it aesthetically. So Martin Nussbaum has a very moralistic view on literature. Yes, you can have bad things in literature, but that's because it teaches you how to do good things. I think that's it. Maybe it's true, but there is something a lot more interesting going on in the way evil appears in literature. It's how our emotions are linked to our perception of what is good, what is not good. And in a sense, I'd see that from a sort of almost natural law perspective. There are things that are revolting, and if you read it in a novel, you're revolted, and that's precisely the point. You don't like that character doing that thing because you have a system of morality that indicates it as bad. And it's not something that you're supposed to brush away. This feeling is entirely part of your experience as a reader, so it's part of the aesthetics of the novel.
It's not a diagnosis.
Exactly.
No.
You're not supposed to say, well, this character is evil because he displays manipulative, narcissistic traits, whatever. That's not the point. The point is that the author chose to display a character doing a certain thing because in the whole economy of the novel, this will lead the reader either to sympathize more with another character, to doubt that this character is reliable, whatever. It makes you turn pages, and that's the whole point of a novel. You have to make sure that your reader wants to go from the beginning to the end.
So how does that relate then to social media? I mean, so can we do the same things there, or is this specific to literature?
That's very interesting. Well, if you look at the idea of transgression online, there was an influencer in Britain a few years ago who was filming himself doing very rude things. And of course, people were outraged, and he was, well, basically entering people's private homes and cursing at them, or entering a shop and breaking things. And then it was revealed that most of it was just a skit. He was in full agreement with the people or with the shop owner or whatever. It was just to create content and give them also visibility. So not all of his videos were staged like that, but many were. And I suppose we have a nasty addiction to seeing bad things happen. And social media is great for feeding that. There are all the disaster videos a few seconds before the disaster happens. And it can be very mundane things from, I don't know, a kid dropping his ice cream and you laugh because it's very sweet and oh well, okay. And then he gets another ice cream. And then you have the very scary ones of people doing bungee jumping or rafting or whatever and finding themselves in very bad accidents. And the video that you have is actually the last second before something tragic happened to someone. So the constant stream of information online somehow erodes the difference between that. And I think probably one of the difficulties in what social media is creating to the way we see the world is that it erodes the difference between things that are really, really serious and things that don't really matter, because everything is just content. If you can film yourself displaying how sad you are because, I don't know, your boss said something mean or because you failed an exam or whatever, and you post a very carefully edited TikTok meltdown, this somehow normalizes a high level of emotionality that would be almost the constant. And then it's very hard to scale down and think that, well, maybe it's not the end of the world and maybe some other things would deserve this same display of emotion. So the way we try to make videos, well, over-emotional and really over the top, neutralizes more normal, more mundane moments of sadness, whatever. So it's as though nothing can be just a normal level of sadness or a normal level of happiness. It has to be over the top all the time.
Is this also because we think that what's happening online is authentic and what we read in books are fiction?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure that people believe everything they see online is authentic. Right. One thing I've noticed is that there's almost a sort of a dissociation, and that's the whole problem of the memetic. Yeah. So if it's a meme, then it circulates and it's viral, not because it is true, but because it can shape the way you see the world. And a successful meme would be an image that everyone could appropriate and edit the text, and it can be adapted to so many different circumstances. It does not have to be true, it doesn't have to be real, it just allows you to express a thing. The trouble is that it also shapes the way you will see the world. So I recently found myself saying, I see the world in memes, that everything around me was memeable. And it's exactly the point of a meme. It shapes the way reality will be perceived, and it allows you to express it, which in a way is good, but in another way it simplifies things. It allows you to see very basic dynamics. So the question of how deeply this changes our connection to what is true, what is false, is very different from, well, what would happen in a book. So I was mentioning Rousseau, for instance. His novel La Nouvelle Héloïse in 1761 was so successful because people thought that these were a set of letters that was just mildly edited. So they wanted to believe that it was true. But even when they knew it was not true, when they knew it was all fiction, they still wanted to believe that the characters were true. And there are very endearing accounts of Rousseau saying that he received letters of people asking him how the characters are doing long after the whole thing had been debunked. So there was almost a will to believe that a novel that displayed such intense feelings had to be true in a way or another.
And this sparks a lot of new thoughts, but our time is out almost. But since we are here on a conference on mental health and we're talking about diagnosing, and I'm not a doctor and neither are you, but
I'm a doctor of books.
Yeah, exactly. But if you would put a diagnosis on yourself, what would that be?
In old terminology, I'd say vaguely histrionic, but it works well with being a teacher. What would be your diagnosis on yourself?
I'm a hypoman. Yeah.
I suppose it's okay.
Yeah, I think it is. Thank you, Marie Daouda.
Thank you very much.